Okay, we're about to do a cd009 conversion into an FDRX7. We'll run you through the step by step, so when you purchase the kit you know what is required on your end if you already have a cd009 gearbox that you wish to use. Otherwise you can option to buy a brand new one within our kit. So we've got the FD box out of the car. What we'll be using off the FD box will be the factory bell housing. It'll bolt to our adapter plate, which will then go onto this trans here. Now what's required is you cut the bell housing off of the cd009 box, and it won't matter if it's a cd009, a cd001, a cd02, a cd00, they are all the same. The only real changes are in the clutch fork, whether it has a fork for the clutch bearing or it has an internal hydraulic concentric bearing. So getting back to the case needs to be cut behind this line here. So if you get a thin cutting disc on an angle grinder, that is your reference point to cut. Once that is cut off, you'll get a flap disc and take off the edges and make sure that the surface under here is proud of the case surface, so that when you do get your adapter plate and bolt it on, the adapter plate now becomes a part of this bearing retainer plate here. So it's important that this seats 100%. And we'll cut this and we'll show you exactly what I mean. Okay, so now that the gearbox housing has been cut, you want to make sure that when you do put the adapter plate on, you've got like a smallest of air gap all the way around. If you can see light between the back face and there, that means that the adapter plate is seated correctly. You don't have the adapter plate bottoming out on the transmission case, because that's going to cause you issues. The reason that will cause you issues is because this is what it's replacing. Now this is the original bearing retainer plate, and this is what is machined into the back of the adapter plate so that it does hold the bearing in, it locates, it has your seal, it has the pockets for the selector shaft to move in and out without bottoming out. And yeah, so if this is not seated correctly on this face here, basically you're going to have your bell housing kicked at a small angle because it'll be on the gearbox case. Yeah, so can't emphasize enough, this needs to be seated correctly on this face. With the cd009 input shaft, the Nissan splines are set back a lot further than what a Mazda gearbox is. So looking at the Mazda, we've got where our spigot bearing runs, and then we're straight into spline, whereas the Nissan has quite a long area before we get to the spline. Therefore, this input shaft is actually too long to go into a Mazda. Now your spigot bearing runs there, so we need to turn this area here down to this diameter in order to use the spigot bearing. That excess length will get cut off. It's approximately 15 millimeters, but we'll put a bell housing on it and we'll show you exactly where you need to cut. So you'll see now that the input shaft has been turned, so we've got a constant diameter for our spigot bearing. Now there's two ways you can do it. We have a setup in the lathe so that we can actually turn it. The other way is to disassemble the box, and you can pull the whole input shaft out, and then obviously you can put it in a smaller lathe and turn it down to suit. So in the kit you will get the adapter plate, you'll get the front seal, and you'll get a solid gold spigot bush. Now the seal is purely just a dust seal, and it will stop the oil coming out from the front of the box, stop the dirt getting in. You can put it in either way, it will work. It's not critical that it's directional. Quick tip with once you've turned your input shaft, the size you want is 15.87 to 15.90 millimeters on the diameter. You don't want to make it too big, otherwise on your spigot bush it'll be too tight. It's not your girlfriend, you actually want it to be a little bit loose. Now when it comes to cutting the length of the shaft, depending on what bell housing you've got will determine how much you need to cut off. For example, the FD bell housing 150 millimeters, so with the adapter plate installed we want to measure forward 150 millimeters plus 3 to stick out the belly housing, mark it and cut it. You can cut it with an angle grinder, you can cut it with a hacksaw, and you can chew it. Whatever gets the job done.